Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. In fact, the crazy is a double-fisted Molson, because it's coming from Canada. But, Jim, before we get into our good martini, which is much closer to home than that, we are seeing some signs that things are not looking good when it comes to Russia's intentions towards Ukraine. There are tweets out this morning, one quoting Alabama Congressman Mike Rogers, that there's potentially shelling of civilian infrastructure going on, in addition to recent cyber attacks. And as you tweeted out just minutes ago, it appears there's a lot of things being burned at a very important place in Kiev.
Yeah, that's the Russian embassy in Kiev. People are saying that there's a lot of smoke, not from a bombing or anything, but coming out of the chimneys, which suggests that they are destroying documents. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why would Russian diplomats in Kiev be burning lots of documents? Well, they might feel that the embassy is not going to be secure in the not too distant future. And you might think, what do Russian diplomats in Kiev know is going to happen that would make them think the Russian embassy in Kiev is not secure? Oh, by the way, the United States pulled its last people out of the embassy in Kiev a couple of days ago. As for the shelling, my understanding is that is in the Donbas region, where it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes you do get the forecasts that are cloudy with the chance of incoming Russian separatist shells. So that by itself is not an enormously out of character development, but it does certainly is an ominous sign. And we mentioned this before our regular Martinis listeners. So just in case Russia invades by the time you hear this, we don't feel like we ignored it right before the war started.
Yeah, that's the latest info we have as we're doing this.
And if nothing happens, forget we said this.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, well, let's talk about happier things, at least for the moment, with our good martini. Jim, it was just a little over a month ago that Glenn Youngkin got sworn in as the governor of Virginia. It's been a busy and, as it turns out, very effective first month on the job. One of the very first things he did was sign an executive order giving parents the option of whether or not their kids will wear masks to school. Predictably, school districts in more left-leaning areas, particularly around where we live, took them to court. The ones in Northern Virginia won initially. The one in Chesapeake was thrown out by the Virginia Supreme Court. But eventually, Glenn Youngkin got his way because he found a couple of Democrats in the state Senate to go along with his idea of putting parents back in charge of whether the kids wear their masks. So it passed the democratically controlled state Senate. It passed the Republican-controlled state House of Delegates. And yesterday, Glenn Youngkin declaring victory on the steps of, I believe, the Capitol, or maybe it's the governor's mansion. I think it was the Capitol yesterday in Richmond.
It is my distinct privilege and honor to be able to sign Senate Bill 739 into law in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So, Jim, of course, as we've said, he was vilified by the left, trying to kill people, and now he's apparently the tip of the iceberg. So Glenn Youngkin not only got a major achievement right out of the gate here, but he's also the tip of the spear, and now we're seeing place after place across the country, even in deep blue areas, rolling things back. And, of course, the COVID numbers do have a lot to do with that, but his courage kind of really got the ball rolling here.
Indeed, Greg, and the Democrats on this issue had the choice of losing quickly and easily or losing in a very slow-paced and painful way. And if you ever heard that saying about somebody who fell out of a tree and they hit every branch on the way down, that's kind of the way the Democrats were going with this. The entire time, first of all, again, all Youngkin was looking for is an ability to allow parents to, if they want their kids to not wear masks, to go to school without masks. He's not saying masks are banned. He's not saying you can't have your kid wearing masks. There's an excellent chance in all these bunch of these blue jurisdictions that once this change goes through, lots of kids are going to keep wearing masks. And that's fine. That's fine. No one's telling you can't wear a mask. And oh, by the way, notice how often this is described as a mask mandate ban or a mask ban or something like that, a little bit inaccurately. The second thing is just kind of baffling is we kind of saw here in Fairfax County, they went to this, although I've been told that Fairfax County Public Schools keeps shifting what measuring stick they want to use, is if you wanted to not look like you were, bending your will to Governor Youngkin, you weren't giving him a win, is to say, okay, look, we're going to do this based on conditions. Here are the conditions that when this happens, we'll allow students to not wear masks. And oh, by the way, based on the positivity rate on PCR tests, Fairfax County is in that moderate category now. But apparently they're saying, oh, no, actually, we want to do it on a different measurement of cases per 1,000 people or something like that. They've suddenly realized we're knocking on the door of achieving that threshold for not wearing masks. And all of a sudden, they want to find a completely different threshold. Either way, it's all going to be moot come March 1st. And, you know, all of these school districts could have said, okay, we agree. The Omicron wave is subsiding. It is no longer the same level of threat as before everybody was vaccinated. Everybody's now had more than a year to get vaccinated. Everybody's had months and months to get boosted. You know, you are now accepting whatever risks that go with choosing to go masked. It's not up to us. Everybody go out and, you know, make your own decisions for what makes you feel safest. And that could, you know, they could have backed down and they could have avoided this. They're not. And now I'm just left with the question, Greg. Hey, Alexandria shoppers, who's reading the room now?
Very good. The lady at the Safeway, wherever that was, got a little ahead of her skis on that one. So, Jim, I don't know if you saw the tweet the other day from Randi Weingarten, our favorite head of the American Federation of Teachers, where she says, when does Joe Biden get credit for, defeating the Omicron wave here?
Defeating. Oh, okay. That's a fun way to describe not having all those tests we needed around the holidays, back when we needed them. I think they said earlier the week, I think we're down 80% from the peak. That this was kind of, you look at what's happened in 2020, you look at what's happened in 2021, heading into 2022. Lo and behold, the cases spread a lot in winter and they go down in the summer. Almost like it's behavior driven, and the more time you spend outside, the more sunlight, the more air currents, the more wind, you're outside, you're getting vitamin D from the sunlight, you're enjoying yourself, your life is going fine, you're less likely to get it. You're indoors in winter, it's cold, people are closer together, it's already overlapping with cold and flu season, all that other stuff, people get more cases. That's the only thing that's really changed the dynamics here. You can look at the states that have mask mandates, you can look at the states that didn't have mask mandates. It really didn't make that much of a difference, the numbers at all. And so, it has been this fascinating. Oh, Biden defeated the Omicron. Yeah, because everybody got it. There's nobody left for it to jump into. That's what happened. So anyway.
Randi Weingarten, once again, getting all political, which officially isn't her job, but always seems to be. Maybe she just needs a really good nap. And I'm sure Randi Weingarten is going to want to get the best quality sleeping materials from MyPillow.com. But she's got to use our promo code Martini if she wants to take advantage of these fantastic deals. And obviously, you can do the very same thing as well. Wonderful deals. More than 20 deals for you to choose from, including My Pillows, the pillows themselves, as low as $19.98. Amazing. My Slippers at 50% off. My Pillow towel sets at just $39.99. 60% off the Giza Dream Sheets with a price as low as $39.99. I love and use all of these products. And when you order with our promo code Martini, you get a free copy of Mike Lindell's book.
You know, Greg, I'm sure Randi Weingarten will get right on that. Because we know she listens to this podcast all the time. Look, teachers work hard, but teachers' unions representatives spend a lot of time loafing around. And for that, they need slippers. And if you're going to use any kind of slippers, you're going to want to have My Slippers. With the exclusive 4-tier cushioning system, including the My Pillow patented fill, the memory foam, the impact gel, and a sole that can be worn indoors and outdoors.
You will find all of these offers and more at MyPillow.com. Click the radio listener square, don't forget that part, and use the promo code Martini at checkout. Or use the code when you call 800-874-0104 to place your order. Right now, every single order using the promo code Martini will receive Mike's new book entitled What Are the Odds? From Crack Addict to CEO, absolutely free. MyPillow.com, promo code Martini, or call 800-874-0104. Don't forget the code Martini for your free book. And, of course, the major discounts. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now, and inflation. We don't have a new report today, but we do have some new polls showing overwhelmingly that the number one concern for American citizens and American voters in this pivotal election year, and just looking at their lives right now, is inflation. Everything just about is costing more, and in some cases, a lot more. I'm thinking about gasoline in particular. Spent over $50 gassing up the car yesterday. Not happy. But Joe Biden, of course, after calling Lester Holt a wise guy, and you do an excellent job of laying this all out in the Morning Jolt today, it's all, semiconductors. We're falling behind on the supply. So there's demand, and that's inflation. And he says a bunch of Nobel economists are saying it's going to be headed the right way here pretty quick. But as you quote in today's Jolt, a very unlikely source, who you think would be a political ally and probably is with President Biden, is calling that malarkey, in other words. In the New York Times, Steve Rattner, President Obama's former car czar, says this. For starters, the supply chains have not been cut off, just stretched. And supply issues are by no means the root cause of our inflation. Blaming inflation on supply lines is like complaining about your sweater keeping you too warm after you've added several logs to the fireplace. The bulk of our supply problems are the product of an overstimulated economy, not the cause of it. Sure, there have been some COVID-related challenges, but most of our supply problems have been homegrown. Americans have resumed spending freely, and along the way, they've been creating shortages akin to those in a shopping mall on Black Friday. All that consumption has resulted from vast amounts of government rescue aid, including 3 rounds of stimulus checks and substantial underspending by consumers during the lockdown phase of the COVID crisis. And he says there's an unforeseen shift in what consumers are buying. So we sent out a lot of stuff. A lot of money to people. It's not paid for by cutting spending or anything else in other areas. And the demand is up. So also, Jim, as you point out in the Jolt today, other people are calling malarkey on Biden's suggestion that it's going to be short term. So all in all, terrible.
Yeah. So yesterday, my colleague Andrew Studiford, who runs National Review's Capital Matters, it's not a separate site. Think of it as like a sort of sub-blog of National Review focused on economic and business news. I said, hey, Andy Puzder, he's formerly the CEO of CKE Restaurants. He's a senior fellow at Pepperdine University. But basically, he's a guy who knows this stuff backwards and forwards. And he has a really good essay, basically, why is everything so expensive? Where did this inflation come from? And he makes the point, because you can say, oh, well, it's the pandemic and supply chain issues. Look, maybe supply chain issues are an issue on the sides. The labor shortage doesn't help. These are exacerbating factors. But if the issue was the pandemic, you'd expect just about everybody to have roughly the same level of infrastructure, but we don't. In fact, different countries have different amounts, and what Puzder looks back and recognizes is we spent an enormous amount of money on COVID relief. He adds up the numbers, comes out to about $5.3 trillion in total, which he does the math. That's like 27% of our GDP. Now you look at all of our other big, Western economies, the European Union, 11%. United Kingdom, 18%. Canada, 20%, right? Now, all of them have inflation, but surprise, surprise, none of them have it as bad as the United States does. So is it the pandemic that's doing it? Or is it that we spent a whole lot more? Our government borrowed and spent a whole lot more money to deal with the pandemic, spread it from coast to coast. People have a lot more money in their pockets. So demand has increased, but supply has not. Ta-da, surprise. Prices go up. Demand is up, supply is down. Again, supply chain, is it a factor? Yeah, it makes things a little worse. Is the labor shortage a factor? Yeah, it makes things worse. But you look at it, basically under the Puzder analysis, about $4 trillion of bipartisan COVID relief makes sense. But inflation, you may recall, we didn't really have terribly bad inflation throughout 2020. And in fact, it wasn't even that bad in the first couple of months of 2021. It was really around the middle of last year where all of a sudden you're like, man, are you noticing this at the grocery store? Are you noticing this you're filling up your tanks and stuff, particularly? And it really seemed to accelerate into the fall. So, you look at that, what happened there? Well, we had an extra $1.9 trillion in COVID relief. And under this analysis, that's where it started getting to the point where okay, it's way more money than people know how to spend. And that's only going to put upward pressure on prices, right? A whole bunch of boosted demand, not an increase in supply. If you ever watched DuckTales, it was a great episode back in the 80s. It's basically the gist is if everyone becomes a millionaire, producers hike prices because all of the customers are millionaires now and they can afford to pay more. So I wish I could give you better news, but the frightening stuff, and Andrew wrote a bit about this, but I don't usually look for an enormous amount of economic analysis from the chief executive of Heineken, but Dolph Vandenbrin has a quote in an interview. It's just kind of terrifying, where he says in 24 years he's never seen anything like it. Quote, across the board we are faced with crazy increases. There's no model that can handle this kind of inflation. It's kind of off the charts. So it's anybody's guess what the impact is going to be on volumes due to all these price increases. Now, this is Heineken. Like, beer is generally pretty easy to sell. So if they're seeing this kind of stuff, it indicates, no, it's not over. We may not even be at the peak. The numbers have been really bad so far at the start of 2022. And, certainly not a lot of indicators this is going to get better anytime soon.
Yeah, and the Fed is expected to raise interest rates, which is good for us and our savings. But for a federal government that's $30 trillion in debt, raising interest rates on that and having to pay it off, the interest every year, not going to be a lot of money left for other stuff. So they'll probably just print more money, Jim. What could be the problem?
Hey, you know what's really great for gas prices, Greg?
What?
War.
Yeah, that'll be skyrocketing. Yeah.
That was sarcasm, by the way, for anyone who didn't,
Yes. Well, I hope the people that got their stimulus checks saved them, because you might need them now with everything costing more. And I also think as more people do their taxes, they're going to realize, because of those expanded child tax credits, the refunds aren't going to be as big this year. So that'll make Biden really popular, too. All right, let's move on to our double-fisted crazy martini now, Jim. And let's start in the Canadian Parliament. Both of these deal with the ongoing fight between the Canadian government and the truckers. Basically, the Canadian version of Prime Minister's questions. Member of Parliament, Conservative Party member Melissa Lantsman, the only female Jewish member of the Parliament, decided to pull out a couple of different Justin Trudeau quotes, one from back when he was running for Prime Minister and how he described the Canadian people involved in the protests recently. Let's just say the verbiage is a little bit different. So here is her explaining Justin Trudeau's hypocrisy, and Trudeau going to the tired old Liberal response.
If Canadians are to trust their government needs to trust Canadians. Those are the words of the Prime Minister in 2015. These people, very often misogynistic, racist, women haters, science deniers, the fringe. Same Prime Minister 6 years later as he fans the flames of an unjustified national emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, when did the Prime Minister lose his way? When did it happen?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag. We will choose to stand with Canadians who deserve to be able to get to their jobs, who be able to get their lives back. These illegal protests need to stop, and they will, Mr. Speaker.
Jim, we'll get to the second part of this crazy martini in just a moment. But to watch Trudeau, like so many others on the left, whenever they start facing the heat, their immediate response is to decide that the person questioning their decisions has to be an extremist. Either you're a racist, or in this case, you're thrown in with the Nazis.
Greg, you notice the first thing he went to was swastikas. This was not that he's, riffing, speaking off the cuff. He's not keeping track, and the idea pops into his mind. That was his go-to move. And he didn't care. He didn't even blink at the prospect of saying to the lone Jewish member of Parliament, "You're the Nazi here." I've always kind of wondered if Justin Trudeau is as sharp as his fan base thinks he is. I think there's plenty of evidence there. Also, he's one of those figures where if he didn't exist, you'd have to invent him, because he spends so much time talking about privilege and how he needs to stand up for the little guy. And look, he's the son of the Prime Minister. It doesn't get any more privilege than that. I don't see Justin Trudeau getting nearly as much grief for being the son of Pierre Trudeau as George W. Bush got for the grief for being son of George H.W. Bush, right? And by the way, I figure this is a big reason of why. Why is he always so much talking about the threat to minorities? Because he wore blackface all the time in his college years and younger years and stuff like that. Why? He's overcompensating. Deep down, he knows he is everything that he hates, or he's supposed to hate, as a good progressive, and thus he has to bend over backwards, just to go even further to do that. And thus, once he's decided that he is the hero that Canada needs, that everyone else who's opposed to him must be the villain, and he cannot distinguish between a Jewish member of Parliament who thinks he's going way too far and a Nazi, and that's absolutely mind-bogglingly bad. I do genuinely start to wonder. It's throughout the entire time of this trucker fight, where 90% of Canadian truckers are vaccinated. I asked last week, why doesn't he just declare victory? Why doesn't he say, okay, great, the mandate did what it's supposed to do, we're all done? all right, truckers, you can go home. You're not mandated. Everybody, no one has to show proof of negative tests. Let's get trade going back and forth against the border. Let's go back to normal. We won. And just let that go. And but the truckers presumably they might still think he's an SOB, but they'd be happy to go back to doing their living their lives and doing their jobs normally. And he'd be able to say, look, I got 90% of them vaccinated. That's that's still an A- on a test. That's fine. I'm not going to shut down my entire nation's economy over getting these last 10% done. And that's what the thing is that he's now turned it into. No. It's this Eric Cartman-esque respect my authority. In the end, I have the power to make you do something you don't want to do. And that's never a good place for a leader to be. Certainly not a Western democratic leader. Anybody wants to have any notion of living up to this, having the consent of the governed. You weren't elected to make people do things. And it's just unbelievable that, he's lost the plot of this. I'm kind of struck that members of his party aren't pulling him aside and saying, dude, what are you doing? You're going to take down the entire country this way. But I guess we're going to have to wait and watch. But there's a strong, fascinating indicator of just how out of control the progressive elites in Canada have gotten.
The pandemic has been horrific in so many different ways, particularly for kids. It has exposed some things. Parents have paid a lot closer attention to what's going on in schools, and you can see the tendencies of political leaders. No matter what they say, there is an instinct to grab more power. Lord Acton was right. There's a reason that quote still hangs on. But also, Jim, the list of the donors to the truckers has been hacked. And it was out there on Twitter and perhaps other places as well. And so reporters started calling up people who gave piddling little amounts, relatively speaking, to the protest, to the point where, store owners were harassed because their names were out there and forced to close. There's a story of a woman in Ottawa who had to close her cafe because of that. You had Washington Post reporters, Sagar Enjeti, if that's how you say his name, has a screenshot of the email that people are sending out from the Washington Post saying, hey, noticed you donated to the convoy. Just curious if that's true and why you might have done that. So, basically getting these people way more public attention than they ever wanted here, to the point where, Jim, even Ilhan Omar is wondering what the press is doing here. Her tweet is, I failed to see why any journalist felt the need to report on a shop owner making such an insignificant donation rather than to get them harassed. It's unconscionable and journalists need to do better. Now, normally when I read an Ilhan Omar tweet, and I guess it's probably the first one, where I think I agree with it, I think of where did I go horribly wrong? But in this case, Jim, I think it's just, this is so blatantly, obviously stupid that even Ilhan Omar gets it.
Greg, the good folks at The Onion created a parody of BuzzFeed-style sites called Clickhole. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2018, they did a headline that keeps coming back over and over again because it keeps articulating a feeling that happens every once in a while in politics. The headline is, heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. And there's this guy staring at the camera with this look of deep frustration and mixed feelings. That's exactly how I feel right now. Ilhan Omar, that is a great point. Mark it. I doubt that's the first time those words have appeared on this podcast, and excellent chance it'll be the last time. But nonetheless, she's right. She's right. Why are you doing? How? There was a journalist really loved this old philosophy of we comfort the afflicted and we afflict the comfortable. That's the exact opposite of what they're doing here in a lot of recent cases. A lot of times, people in national media see their job is to act as the reputational bodyguards of those in power, particularly those in government. And once you do that, you're a PR agent. Once you do that, you're just an extension of the public relations firm that they hire to put out good spin and stuff like that. So it's a pleasant surprise to see Ilhan Omar making this statement. I don't think it's necessarily going to change, the dynamics of what's happening either in Canadian media or U.S. media. But it is a really fascinating red flag for them that Ilhan Omar thinks this is going too far.
Well, if it's any comfort, the media will change their cheerleading uniforms once the Republicans are back in power here, or the Conservatives take power in Ottawa. So it's selective how much they'll afflict the comfortable.
I mean, this is the angriest I have seen Ilhan Omar when somebody does something. Some people did something. It's a deep cut. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't, folks.
I do. Very good, very good. Jim, on that note, we will call time for today, and we'll reconvene tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Please tell your friends about us as well. Also, thanks so much for your kind reviews and your 5-star ratings. Please keep those coming. You can find us on those home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast and follow us on Twitter. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday, and please join us on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
Hi, it's Dana Lash, host of The Dana Show. Every day, I'm here to keep you up to speed on the most important stories and info that you need to know in your very busy life. And if you're always on the go and you want to stay connected, just download our daily podcast and take it with you. It's a great way to get up to speed on what you need to know and what legacy media may not be telling you. Visit danaradio.com and click on the podcast link or subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.